Welcome to the Double Vision podcast. We are identical twin sisters who grew up with a rare retinal condition, which basically means we've had to do a lot of adapting. My name is Jenelle, and I'm the oldest by 4 whole minutes, so naturally I get to go first.
And I'm Joy. A lot of our life has been problem solving, a lot of feelings, and realizing that we're probably not the only ones navigating this.
I work as a therapist, and I tend to slow things down and look for what's steady underneath it all.
And I'm a writer and creative. I have a background in education, and I navigate the emotional journey in real time.
She does, and we balance each other out.
Jenelle keeps one foot on the ground.
And Joy keeps things honest and alive.
On Double Vision Podcast, we talk about the social and emotional experience of being in a body.
The stuff we all deal with: identity, belonging, and self-trust.
We talk about anxiety and overthinking,
and what it looks like to advocate for yourself and keep going, even when it's hard.
We make space for the parts that don't show up on paper, but shape our whole lives.
If you've ever felt like you're trying to figure out how to be yourself out loud,
you're in the right place.
Welcome back. This is Jenelle. Today, Joy and I are exploring the what, when, why, and how of the helping relationship. As we prepared for this episode, we did what we normally do and sent text messages, emails, WhatsApp messages back and forth. And my most recent one to Joy this morning said, "I'm really excited about this conversation and kind of nervous because it is a complex topic and we will be able to cover a portion of it, but just know that we will continue to have future episodes about this topic. So this is just the tip of the iceberg today. But we want to start by talking about what is a helping relationship."
Yeah, and this is Joy. It's interesting because sometimes people think, oh, you just have a helping relationship with someone who has a disability. But if you're alive, if you're breathing right now, you have a beating heart, you have at some point needed help. And that doesn't matter whether it's something physical or maybe you've needed some emotional support. But at some point, everybody needs help, from the time when you're little and you're relying on parents to the times when you're in friendships and relationships, families. Over time, you're going to need to rely on one another to get your needs met.
Exactly. And being in a helping profession myself as a mental health provider, and Joy, you in education, those both involve some helping roles. So I think we're both drawn to places and areas where we can be helpful. And I sometimes wonder if that has anything to do with our history of also needing to ask for help.
Yeah, I wonder that too, especially because I don't think that we necessarily experience this help from other people as something unique to us as people with disabilities, but I definitely think we experience it more frequently, and it's something that's maybe a daily occurrence for us, especially being out in public when either we might be approached by someone to help us or when we might need some kind of assistance or not. But it just, those occurrences happen a lot more frequently than people without disabilities.
As you're saying, Joy, I think this conversation can apply to anyone, but in today's conversation, we're specifically speaking through the lens of our experience as people with disabilities.
Yes.
In our very first episode for Double Vision Podcast, we talked a bit about interdependence, and that is an example with the Be My Eyes app. If you've listened to that first episode, or if you haven't listened to it, go back and listen to it. But essentially, we were talking about what it's like to receive help in an interdependent way through Be My Eyes.
Yeah, and it's such a beautiful expression of help, and that's why I love the dignity that apps like Be My Eyes bring. I think I especially like Be My Eyes maybe because it doesn't involve anybody near me that's going to touch or grab me, like the person's on the other end of the phone or glasses. So that's kind of reassuring as someone who has been, grabbed in public in the name of help on multiple occasions. And at the same time, it was just this experience that really illustrates how beautiful a helping relationship can be when it's so reciprocal. If you think about those times with your spouse or with a child when you know that you're giving something to them and they're getting something from it and they're giving something to you too. Because I guess when we really think about it, when we are the helper, we feel so good, right? It's like such a good feeling to help someone. And it's a good feeling to be helped when it is in a reciprocal manner and when it's not overly done so as well, right?
I so agree. And I'm thinking of that as a parent, and then also recalling my childhood and the ways that our parents helped us in really caring ways that felt empowering. And that's the best case scenario.
Jenelle, when we've led parent sessions at conferences before, you have led this really great exercise on the helping relationship and kind of picturing what that looks like. And I'm wondering if you could do that for our listeners, because I think it really helps to illustrate where we picture ourselves and kind of what the dynamic is.
Yeah, so I have people picture a scenario where someone is helping an elderly person cross the street. Imagine this in your mind. Visualize what this looks like to have an elderly person making their way across the street and there's someone helping. Now, as you picture this, picture yourself in this scenario and notice, are you picturing yourself as the elderly person or as the person helping the elderly person? And 9 times out of 10, people end up telling me that they're picturing themselves as the helper, not the elderly person being helped.
Why do you think that is?
I think that in our culture, it's seen as maybe heroic at times or
virtuous, maybe?
Maybe virtuous. It's seen as something that we want to be. We want to be the one giving the help. So we're admired. Oftentimes when you hear of stories of something that happened where someone was helpful, the focus is put on the person who did the helping, not on the person who needed the assistance.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was just hanging out with my friend who has a little first grade daughter, and we were talking about how she was the one chosen in her class to be the Special Olympics buddy for somebody, and who, when they do this race, she's going to be their helper. And I said, wow, that's so cool. I bet they chose you for that role because you're so caring. And she's like, yeah, and also I had a cast once when I broke my ankle, so I can relate. And she's like, but at least this time I'm not the one being helped. I get to be the helper. So I thought it was so funny at such a young age that she was so like, at least I'm not the one being helped. I'm like, I wonder where that came from. Is that something like people are born with, or was it something that, like, where did she pick that up, that, oh, I don't want to be the one being helped, I want to be the helper, you know?
Somewhere along the way, she received that implicit message of, you want to be the one helping, not the one who needs the help.
Mm-hmm. Again, going back to like that interdependence, like that might end up being such a cool experience for this little first grade girl and the person who she's helping in the Special Olympics from her class. And at the same time, who knows how scenarios could end up for that student who is going to be helped. Of course, I often picture myself as someone who has been on the receiving end of support in the past as, gosh, what is that like for that person? And I think that's where we kind of shift into, when does helping become over-helping? When does that shift happen? Because there's help, and if there's a help that feels good and it's interdependent, and then there's sometimes an occurrence of when it's not needed or when it's unwanted or forced upon someone, and it's complex, right? Because people are trying to be nice, just assume that they have good intentions, and it's fine. Like, what's the big deal if somebody's over helping or giving you unsolicited help?
Joy, you wrote a story on our blog quite a number of years ago. This was back when you were living in Chicago and your girls were quite young. And it really stuck with me, mostly because it was really funny, actually. But it was about a yoga class that you attended. And it was, I think, such a great example of when that line is crossed.
Okay, yes. I came across this post the other day and I was laughing so hard because I wrote it like 11 years ago. I didn't even remember it. And I was like, kept waiting for, what's going to happen next kind of thing, even though it was something that happened to me. So benefits of old age. Anyways, I had dropped my kids off at school and I had this little yoga studio in Naperville, Illinois, about a block from our house. I used to walk with my guide dog there, and it was an unheated yoga class. So my guide dog would just, Roja would sit at the side of my mat and I would just be doing my yoga. And I had a little yoga community and it was just such sweet memories. But I had this one time where, again, I'm revisiting this story now after being reminded from reading this post. And this person, I guess I called her Marcy, and
we don't really know if that was her name, but
yeah,
you called her Marcy.
Yeah, hopefully it wasn't. Hopefully I used a pseudonym. But anyways, I had gotten to class maybe a minute before it starts, which, you do not want to do because the class was already crowded. Everybody was set up. So then, when you walk in with a guide dog and your mat and all your props and your blocks and your blanket and all the things, you want to make sure that you have time and space to set up. Well, that morning I did not. And so some friends that knew me kind of like made space for me, moved aside. And there was always like the helpful people like, oh, I'll grab you a blanket, Joy, or I'll do, this or that if my hands were full, since I had, the leash and my bag and all the things. But this time there was a new person in class, Marcy, and she immediately introduced herself and she said, okay, I set up your water bottles at 2:00, your blankets at noon, your mat's all rolled out, and I tucked your dog's leash underneath it so that you won't trip over it. And I was like, oh, thanks.
Very efficient.
Yeah. I was like, that this was so thoughtful of her. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's a stranger touching my things. Like she just took it upon herself to like touch my dog's leash, my water bottle. So I was a little bit like skeptical of like this person hesitant going into class, but I'm like, okay, I'm just going to start class and hope for the best. And it was within the first 5 minutes that I'm like, oh my gosh, we have a code red. Yeah, I called it that in the post. It was cracking me up. It was a helperholic. I realized that I was on my hands because basically she ended up, it was the very first cue from the teacher was to cross your right leg behind your left leg. So as I was about to do that, she's tapping my leg, saying, "This is your right leg. Cross it over the left." You would do, and like very loudly, to the point where then I missed his next instruction, the teacher's instructions, because she was loudly telling me what to do and touching me. And so I thought, oh no. So, but again, I didn't really have any words or things to, and I know we're going to talk about that later, like how do we handle these situations, but I was just starting to get really stressed. And so then when he said to go into downward dog, I usually kind of do like a cat-cow right beforehand because that teacher was always encouraging us to like, most good yoga teachers do your own thing, listen to your body, do what you need. And so I usually follow the poses, but I have my own way of doing everything that feels good to my body. And because I didn't get into down dog fast enough, she started to explain to me, well, down dog is when you lift up and you did it. I'm like, no, I know what down dog is. And so then I found myself in class quickly trying to move to every single position so that to catch myself so that she wouldn't be interfering and interrupting. So I was having like just this terrible yoga class, and it was definitely like this code red overhelper situation that I found myself in.
So it was no longer about you being engaged in this class. It was about you trying to get ahead of Marcy so that Marcy wasn't like up in your business.
Exactly.
I want to say that my favorite part of that post is when you're talking about how the teacher is encouraging people to focus on their own internal experience. And you say, yo, Marcy, he's talking to you. I mean, you didn't say it, but you were thinking. Marcy.
I wrote that in the post. Yeah. I was like, are you going to get the clue? I think this teacher was trying to help. I think he was like noticing and like, okay, remember everyone, focus on your practice. And she just was not hearing it.
She was not picking up what he was putting down.
No.
And this is, it's comical, and yet this is a pretty common experience for people with disabilities. If you talk to, and I work with clients with a lot of different adjustments to different types of disabilities, not just blindness. And I hear these types of stories from so many different perspectives. They're actually quite common.
Yeah, it's interesting because people, I think, are well-meaning, and I know we're going to get into that in a minute, but I don't think they sometimes understand that not only can it be annoying, it actually can be dangerous. There's definitely stories of people who, rush in to help somebody in a wheelchair and end up causing an accident or hitting them with the door or things like that because they're so anxious to help that they are forgetting to actually first ask and also to notice, what might be happening for that person. They're not using their critical thinking skills at all. Like even with this Marcy, her moving my things, like I put, when you have limited field vision, everybody who has limited field vision knows that if you even move somebody's stuff 1 inch, it makes it disappear. Like it doesn't exist for that person anymore.
It's a magic trick.
They don't see it. Magic trick if you want to trick anybody, which I know you won't. But it's something where even her moving my things was causing me more disorientation because I have a certain place that I put them, even if she's telling me, I put it at 3:00 or whatever. And that's happened to me at friends' houses too, where they move my shoes or my coat. I'm like, I put them there so I would be able to find them later. And instead, now I'm feeling around or feeling really lost because you've moved my things.
It's very disorienting.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's when someone is trying to be helpful. And it sounds like it comes from a place of really wanting to assist someone. And yet it crosses over into something that is not only not helpful, but actually harmful.
Exactly.
So moving on to why do people overhelp? What's your sense of that, Joy?
I think I don't want to demonize anybody who even is overhelping because I think it does come from a good place. I think that naturally people want to be helpful and naturally people want to, if they see somebody in need, it's like, oh, well, why wouldn't I offer support? But it's again, when it crosses that line, and sometimes it can be kind of slippery.
I'm thinking of that famous quote, advice without request is received as criticism, something like that, and how we all have likely either been the recipient or the giver of unwanted help in the ways that we even give advice, right? You hear someone is having an issue and you want to go to solve the problem because of perhaps your own discomfort with them being upset or them having an emotion or things not being the way they quote unquote should be.
Exactly. Yeah. Somebody's like, oh, I'm having this friend problem or I can't sleep at night. Well, have you tried this? If you just would do this, this would help. And sometimes it can feel really dismissive to the person who is struggling with that thing because you don't, as the advice giver, know that that person has maybe tried those 10 things so many times and they're at a point of exhaustion and maybe they really just wanted to be listened to and heard and not like, if you could just do this A, B, C, you would solve everything. So yeah, that's a good example of like when somebody's offering psychological help or daily help, even if it's not like in the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's something as a mental health provider, I can really find myself easily falling into, and I have to maintain a lot of awareness around. At times, I will jump right to problem solving or what is deemed solution-focused therapy. And there's a time and place for that, sure. And at the same time, it can often be really disempowering for people to just have someone tell them what to do. I mean, that's why they have created approaches such as motivational interviewing, where most medical providers receive some training around motivational interviewing, where you're asking questions of someone to get them to come to their own reasons for why they might want to make a change and what they might want to do rather than telling them do XYZ to treat your diabetes. You're asking them those open-ended questions that help them to find within themselves what they want to shift and change. And so that's just an example of how.
I imagine that when somebody comes to a conclusion of something they want to change on their own, it sticks better. I think there's even research behind that, right? Because when you're just telling somebody what to do, it's not going to stick when you learn your own lesson. You know what I mean? You can't learn other people's lessons for them. And actually, that even makes me think, Jenelle, about how when somebody is jumping in to come up with a solution for somebody right away without letting them figure it out for themselves. I mean, think of it with children even. Like, would kids really learn to tie their shoes if somebody was always jumping in doing it for them? Learn to read, all of these basic things. But even as someone with a disability, I mean, there's been times where, I've had to figure out some pretty creative solutions for things. there's been times when Ben is out of town and there's maybe been a computer thing I've asked him to do 100 times and he's helped me every single time, but he's out of town and I learn the thing while he's gone and like, guess what? I don't need your help with that anymore because I had to figure it out. So I did.
Yeah, Joy, what you're saying makes me think of the term learned helplessness. It's just something that we see when someone is taken care of in ways that don't allow them to really learn how to do things for themselves.
Yeah, that's such a good point about learned helplessness, Jenelle. And I know I've heard you talk a lot about the impact versus intent, because I know sometimes even with your clients, even when it's not about helping situations, there is sometimes this propensity for people to say, well, they had good intentions, and then to write it off and to be like, everything's fine. Everything's fine if the intention is good, right? But then I know you've brought up language for me that has been helpful about impact. Would you be able to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think of even as my role as a mental health provider, when I have the intention to help people, to accompany them in their journey. And there have been times, not because of my intention has been to be supportive, but the way that it has come out of my mouth or the way it was received by the person really actually felt harmful. And in those cases, when it has been brought to my attention, that is a time where I focus on repair and explaining, wow, that was not my intention. And I see that the impact was harmful. And I think it's important to address those situations when they come up.
Yeah. And how do you address those situations when they come up?
It can be really tender. It requires often a courageous conversation. I'm thinking of a situation with one of my dear friends in town where we were on a walk about a year ago, and I was still not always bringing my cane out because depending on where I'm walking and the terrain, because I still have some usable vision, as we talked about in our caneophobia episode, it can be tempting to just leave the cane at home, but I've been really trying to bring it more places. So we were on a longer walk and I was using my cane to navigate, and I hadn't used it that much in front of this friend. So I think this was new for her. And at one point we were going down this curb and I was using my cane to navigate. I did not think I was in any danger of falling or anything going wrong. And she grabbed my arm and the cane to kind of show me that we were going downhill. And I had this really quick kind of fight response, as I would describe it, where I said, "Don't touch me." And I was really caught off guard that she was touching me. And then I immediately was flooded in my body with this sense of shame that I had scolded my friend who was trying to help me and yet was feeling really disempowered by it. And then she was having her own internal experience, which I found out about later through a courageous conversation. So we awkwardly fumbled our way through the rest of this walk, kind of making small talk about other things where there was this major tension, this elephant in the room. And then, yeah, it was hard. And then we ended up deciding, I think it was about a week later, to take a hike together and talk through that experience. And I was able to do that because with this particular friend, we already had established a lot of trust in the relationship. And I already know that she's someone who gets it, which I think almost made it harder in the moment because I was like, this friend, she works as an occupational therapist. And I ended up learning that that was actually part of what was triggering her in the moment to grab at me, because she had in her previous position at a hospital, her primary role was to prevent fall risks. And so her mind was always focused on, how do I prevent someone falling? She worked with a lot of patients who were aging and had different cognitive challenges, such as neurocognitive decline. And so she was hyper aware of what could go wrong if she was not playing the helping role that she was supposed to be helped. So she had all that going on under the surface, not that she or I were thinking of in that moment. But when her and I got together and went on this long hike and we're talking through this, we were kind of like laughing at first. She said, I went home and I told my husband what I did. And he said, "You did what? You grabbed." And so, I mean, she was mortified and she was dealing with her own shame and I was dealing with my own shame around it. And it really could have ended in, well, I'm just not going to be friends with her, like, or with her. Oh,
Or
Janelle's
I
too
won't go on
difficult
walks with
to
her
be.
or something. Yeah.
But instead, it was this really difficult and helpful conversation that we had together where we were able to say, here's what was going on for me. Here's what was going on for me. And really at the heart of it, the intention for her was to keep me safe. That is a beautiful, kind intention. The impact for me was really disempowering and harmful in the moment. And then having that conversation about it allowed us both to understand where we have our triggers, where we have some held trauma, and where we're working to do better.
That's a really beautiful story. And I also remember you telling me, Jenelle, that the story line that you had going in your head when you kind of got in that shame spiral had to do a little bit with, oh my gosh, do my friends just see me as somebody who needs to be cared for? Like, can we go on a walk and be friends, or are all my friends going to need to help me? I think you would put it in better language than I am now, but can you talk a little bit about that?
I think it has to do with that pretty common limiting belief when it comes to disability of like the fear of being a burden. And that comes up a lot with my clients and with my friends who have disabilities. And I don't think that limiting belief comes out of nowhere. I think there are some cultural implicit messages that we receive about who is a burden that really intensifies that fear.
Yeah, I agree. And I just also really want to normalize both. I mean, the impact on people and the intention, and just thinking about how, gosh, I can think of probably 10 times where somebody has reached in front of me or thinking, I'm going to stop you from this. And I think maybe one of those times I felt like I was maybe in true danger, or I would have gotten injured. And I was like, whew, thank goodness they grabbed me, because, you know, there was an overhanging thing and my guide dog didn't catch it, or my O&M skills weren't on that day and my cane didn't catch that pole or whatever. So I can maybe think of one time, but for the amount of stress it's caused, even like almost like a whiplash to my body when someone quickly grabs you and startles you, watch out, you know, and like that actually has probably cost me more neck pain, more like injuries, than maybe the one time that was helpful. So I don't know. It's complicated, because I could foresee some listeners being like, okay, fine, then I guess I'll just let somebody get injured. I guess I won't ever help. You know, there's kind of that black and white thinking that comes in sometimes, where people get their feathers a little ruffled because they're like, I'm just trying to help. Like, I wonder how we approach that person or that conversation. And I know it's different versus, you know, if it's somebody that you have that trust with, like you mentioned with your friend Jenelle, and then whether it's a stranger. So maybe we could dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's important to bring nuance to all of this. I mean, that is really the intention of this conversation that we're having on this episode, is to bring some nuance to the helping relationship. It's not this rigid black and white formula. It's a really tuning into, okay, who's this person in front of me? This isn't all about what I think they need. I'm going to inquire and wonder, what is this experience in this helping relationship like for them in this moment, instead of just this one thought of, oh, I have to get ahead of their needs, or I have to do this or that to meet their needs. Really stopping, taking a pause, slowing it down, and wondering, oh, what will this feel like when I ask them if they need help, or what will this feel like if I just go ahead and grab something for them or move their items. It's a really careful consideration of who's in front of you and what the experience is like for them, not just for yourself.
Totally. And I love that idea, Jenelle, of like really digging into your own uneasiness. I know that both of us have quoted in blog posts a lot of Rebecca Tausig's book. She is a person who wrote the book Sitting Pretty, an incredible author and a person who lives in a disabled body. And she has talked about, you know, people overhelping because she is in a wheelchair, and the circumstances she has found herself in. And she has this chapter on the complications of, I think is it called
It's
the
called
complications?
it's chapter 7, The Complications of Kindness. I actually recommend this book to my clients adjusting to disability more than any other book. If you're able to get it from the library or purchase this book, I highly recommend, if only to read chapter 7, because that is really such an incredible, she weaves in her own stories of awkward helping situations with the complexity of, yes, there are times that we need help and we want help. It's not a bad thing. And there are also times that there's this message given of, oh, I don't think you can do this on your own, or of, oh, if I wasn't here, this heroic person to help, then you wouldn't be okay.
Yeah. And gosh, I really hope, Rebecca, if you're listening, we would love to have her as a guest at some point to dive into this even further. But I do remember this one sentiment that kind of is woven throughout her chapter. And I don't know if I'm going to get the quote exactly. So just go with the idea right now. But in relation to what we've been talking about, when she says, when someone's really consumed with their own uneasiness, it actually prevents them from looking into the face of the person's hand whom they have grabbed. So basically, like if you're, and that's really, I mean, what it ends up being when I go back to that story with Marcy at the yoga studio, you have a sense when it is no longer about you or the help you need at all. It is totally about them and maybe their unease, either their fear that you're going to get hurt or their maybe unease with disability. And again, this isn't to demonize it, because I, for sure, when I've found myself in contact with maybe somebody when I've visited my grandma at, a nursing home, where I'm very uncomfortable because I'm like, gosh, there's all of these, I feel very separate from these people. There's all these high needs. There's all these things that I don't know how to respond to somebody with memory loss, or I don't know how to interact with someone who has Down syndrome, or, you know what I mean? Just different things where I know I've fumbled it completely and been like very awkward or very like maybe not what they needed, because that's my own insecurity. And so that's my work to do, right? But
that's such a good point, Joy. Sometimes it's about just the not knowing and the unfamiliarity and maybe some fear. I know that my daughter works at a little retail store in our town, and she's shared with me on several occasions she's had customers who are blind come into the chocolate shop, and she's assisted them. And the way she describes how she helps just sounds so natural, because she's used to being around someone with vision loss. And so to her, it comes natural. She's not doing it in awkward or weird or over-helping ways. While there might be someone with a different type of disability that comes into her store where maybe she would fumble a bit, because just out of sheer not knowing and trying to figure out what is the best or most helpful in different situations with different types of bodies.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I think because there's no othering there, because she has this amazing, inspiring mom. No, I'm just kidding. But she has this mom who she knows really well, who she's like, she sees you as a person first, her mom first, and not as a disability first. And, that's a real thing where people can sense when you're seeing them as their disability first and not as a person first. And I think, again, if you can remember the people that you know in your life who have a certain disability, and you have that connection with them, then of course you're not thinking about the disability. You're just thinking of that person, and that's your friendship with them. And I think that's where it can really, again, going back to the conversation of how do we respond to overhelpers? The whole title of the episode is it's going to be different in different situations, and depending on whether you know the person well or not. Going back to my story with Marcy and the yoga studio from the beginning, she was a stranger. And so when I reread the end of this post, which again was funny because I did not remember how it ended or how I handled it, I was like, oh, how is Joy 11 years ago going to handle this one? And I ended up saying that basically I just had to tune out not only Marcy's chatter to kind of go into my mindful practice. Here I am at yoga doing the work of trying to focus and be mindful. And then I had to tune out my own chatter about the story that was happening, which my internal chatter was, of course, like, this person thinks I can't do anything. She thinks that she has to help me with everything. What an annoying person. And what is it? Do other people think that? Am I coming across as someone who looks like they need help with every little thing? Like, I had all that chatter and I had to tune her out, and I had to actually stop responding at all. I didn't say thank you for the help, but I also didn't say, leave me alone, lady. I just was just doing my stuff. And after a while of doing that and just tuning in and ignoring her, she did get the message and ease up, and she didn't continue even after class being that much of an overhelper. But I think that's been more of my process, and I think sometimes that works, but other times I do think that I need to find my voice a little bit more. I think I've always seen you, Jenelle, as a little bit more assertive. You can tell people no and to get lost like way more easily than I can. I feel like I'm usually like, oh, it's going to make that person feel good, or I don't want to hurt their feelings because I want them to like me. So as a recovering people pleaser, I think I haven't really tapped into that boundary setting as much as you have. And so I'm looking for some more tips from you, and I'm sure some listeners are as well, for really when I'm ready to kind of set more boundaries and to not just let myself get helped in unhelpful ways when I don't want. So what can I do?
Yeah, thanks, Joy. I mean, I think direct communication, clear is kind. If we can set boundaries for ourselves and others, that can often help alleviate some of that people-pleasing tendencies. So don't put someone else's comfort over your own agency.
I love that, Jenelle. And if this conversation is resonating with you, whether you identify as an overhelper yourself or you're someone who struggles to find your voice in a code red overhelper situation, consider sharing this episode with them. Sometimes these dynamics are hard to name in real time, but listening together can open up a conversation.
Yeah, you could even text it to them and say something like, I'd love to explore this together. We're going to keep unpacking the helping relationship in future episodes and hopefully bring in advocates and activists like Rebecca Tossig and keep the conversation going. But before we go today, we want to end this episode with a little lighthearted game. For our loyal listeners, you know that we like to end each episode with the twin telepathy game. But this week, we're going to mix it up a little bit and play kind of a little twist on the Would You Rather game. And Joy's going to get us started off. Okay, so any of you who have teenagers at home or maybe have been a teenager, you might be familiar with the Would You Rather, where you have basically two options that are both not great, and you kind of have to choose which one you would rather have of the unsavory options. Okay, so Jenelle, would you rather have a Marcy in every single one of your future Pilates and yoga classes that you have to tune out, or find out that you have been Marcy to someone in your life that you've been unaware of? Ooh, Joy, this is a tough one. I did not see this one coming. Okay, so, oh my gosh, I guess I'd rather find out that I have been a Marcy, because then I'd feel like I have some agency to shift it.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Mm. Okay, Joy, now I got one for you. Okay. Would you rather spend 8 hours trying to work your way out of a maze with no one watching, or get out of the maze in 45 minutes with someone helping you, but the whole time they talk to you as if you're a pet? Good girl. Good girl. You got this.
Oh, okay. Well, if there's nothing dangerous in the maze and I don't have anywhere to be, I think I'd rather take the 8 hours. Now, if it's like completely pitch black in there and someone's chasing me or something, then I would take the other one. I know you're not giving me those details, and maybe I'm cheating by saying this, but most likely I'd want to be able to just take my time with nobody watching.
I get that.
I like that little twist, Jenelle. Oh, we'll have to come up with something different next time.
Would you rather play twin telepathy, or would you rather?
Who's a good girl? Thanks for listening to Double Vision Podcast. The stories and perspectives shared here reflect our own lived experiences with blindness and disability and do not represent all blind or disabled people. This podcast is for conversation and reflection only and is not intended as therapy or a replacement for professional mental health care. If you're enjoying the show, please rate and review wherever you listen. You can also leave us a voice message at 949-414-8336 or email mail@doublevisionblog.com with any suggestions for future episodes or comments. Special thanks to our production team, TLS Productions and Benjamin J. Thomas.